As he mentioned, this is a carol service talk. Please bear with me. A group of us arrived at about 1:30 in the morning last night, this morning, so still a little bit kind of bleary-eyed, but we will get there. So I'm going to read the passage for us. This is from Isaiah 9. This talk is constructed on this passage. It's Isaiah 9, 2-7. And here, God tells us, it's just stunning verses, the people walking in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of the shadow of death, a light has dawned. You have enlarged the nation and increased their joy. They rejoice before you as people rejoice at the harvest, as men rejoice when dividing the plunder. For as in the day of Midian's defeat, you have shattered the yoke that burdens them, the bar across their shoulders, the rod of their oppressor. Every warrior's boot used in battle and every garment rolled in blood will be destined for burning, will be fuel for the fire. For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the increase of his government and peace there will be no end. He will reign on David's throne and over his kingdom, establishing and upholding it with justice and righteousness from that time on and forever. The zeal of the Lord Almighty will accomplish this. So that's Isaiah 9, 2-7. This is a carol service talk that I gave in December 2020. This was pre-recorded in the cathedral, and then it was aired like live on YouTube afterwards. So this is the talk. Here we go. There we go. Sorry, I can't actually see because of the glare. Hi and welcome. It's such a joy to be with you this evening. A huge welcome if you're joining us from Durham, and an equally large welcome if you're joining us from further afield this evening. We're probably all thinking it, though. It's not quite the same, is it? You know, we'd usually be crowding into the cathedral, it's softly lit, and then spilling out and crowding into the DSU or St. Nick's in the marketplace for mince pies and drinks, you know, shoulders rubbing, voices lifting, and laughter filling the air. This is a Christmas none of us expected. A Christmas perhaps none of us even wanted. You know, the familiarity which usually marks this season almost feels like it's been pried away from us through lockdowns and isolations. It's usually the most wonderful time of year. It's a time of gingerbread houses, eggnog lattes from Starbucks, they were probably out in April, reindeer antlers, winter balls, and eating around 3 Christmas dinners per week. It's usually beginning to look a lot like Christmas, isn't it? Chestnuts roasting on an open fire as we strain to reach Mariah's operatic heights, and then before we know it, we're driving home for Christmas. Yeah. Do you see what I did there? It's like Christmas songs, isn't it? Now, I don't want to sound too much of a Scrooge, but instead, most of us have been in corridors with in college with strangers that we don't really want to be with. And perhaps we're feeling just a little fed up with waiting. Here's a story of a family who waited for something special this Christmas. I don't suppose you've heard the story of Kevin the Carrot. There's no reason why you should, but Kevin the Carrot is from the Christmas Aldi advert. The John Lewis one last year didn't quite do it for my heartstrings as much as this carrot family did. If you haven't seen it, this is what it's about. It starts with the carrot family. You know, they're all gathered around the Christmas dinner, but one of them is missing. Baby Carrot declares in a small, high-pitched voice, "It's not Christmas until Daddy gets home." Oh, it's so sad. But Daddy, Kevin the Carrot, was a long, long way from home. Would he spend Christmas all cold and alone? The Carrot family, they were waiting expectantly on the dining room table for Daddy to arrive. And unbeknownst to them, Daddy, this is Kevin the Carrot, is battling to get back to them. You know, through the snow and ice, he hitches a ride from a hedgehog and later from Santa himself. And when he arrives through the cat flap and he's reunited with this family, there's this like glorious, just slow-mo kind of like shot of of Baby Carrot being twirled in the air by Daddy Carrot. It's really beautiful. It warms the heart no end. Do you watch it? It's probably not Kevin the Carrot, but I wonder, what are you waiting for this Christmas? What are you waiting for? The philosopher Raymond Tallis says this about waiting. He says, waiting reflects our helplessness, our inability to control the pace as well as the course of events. What are you waiting for this Christmas? What are you really looking forward to? What are you longing for that's outside of your control? Maybe it's for Flat White to reopen, that's it, it's a nice little cafe in Durham. Maybe it's to go home, or maybe it's for things just to return to normal. You know, it might not be kisses under the mistletoe with a certain someone for you this Christmas. That probably wasn't social distancing, don't do that. But what does your mind keep flitting back to throughout the course of the day? Which destination do you just keep tapping into Google Maps just to see how far away it is and how long it would take for you to get there? What are you waiting for? This is a question the author of these words that we had read out to us asks of us all. Even though we're separated by centuries from the original hearers of the words we just heard, these few sentences spark hope. It's a leaning forward in eager expectation at the arrival of something, of someone wonderful. These words are a prophecy, a promise of someone on their way who is going to change everything. But before we look at the promise, let's just zoom in on the condition of the people. That's the second sentence. The people walking in darkness have seen a great light. Can you imagine it? Darkness, captivity, slavery. That was the reality for the people hearing these words, a stumbling through an endless mist, far from home. We aren't unlike those people, are we? It's been a really dark year for most of us, hasn't it? The image of a police officer kneeling on the neck of George Floyd while he's in police custody, handcuffed, and saying that he cannot breathe is just burned onto most of our memories, isn't it? As of last Friday, at the time of writing, 1.4 million people across the globe had died of COVID-19. Domestic violence, also referred to as the shadow pandemic by the UN, has increased by 20%, with so many being trapped at home with their abuser. In the UK, social disparity has been highlighted, environmental issues, immigration policies, the refugee crisis, the list goes on and on. Through these events, we have come face to face with our own privilege, colourblindness, and systemic racism. Justice issues, be they ethical, legal, or social, have been spotlighted in a seemingly unparalleled way this year. I'm sure we can all remember the protests, the pulling down of statues, and that deep gut feeling, which many have carried for centuries, but some of us are only just waking up to, that this is not fair. It should not be like this. And yet, as we move towards rallies or hashtags or no platforming options, it just doesn't seem quite enough, does it? The change never goes deep enough. What real change is this bringing about? Because that's what we want. That's what I want. We want deep, meaningful societal justice and change of the darkness. We've tried all sorts of things to do it. That odd sentence about boots and warriors and garments rolled in blood hints to things that we've tried to do to eradicate the darkness. The fifth sentence in a different translation reads, "For every boot of the tramping warrior in battle tumult, and every garment rolled in blood will be burned as fuel for the fire." Every boot that has hit the floor in protest, each jacket caught and torn in the jostling of marches, each battered eye or broken neck is not enough. They show us the bleeding realities of injustice, but they haven't been enough to secure justice. The change never goes deep enough. And it's not just the darkness out there that burdens us, but it's also the darkness in here, isn't it? The philosopher Nietzsche, he once wrote, "You looked for the heaviest burden you could carry, and it was you that you found. But who can get rid of you? We are the heaviest burdens." As one person recently said, at times it's amazing the violence that people will commit in the name of peace. It's amazing the hate people will show in the name of love. And it's amazing the oppression people will want to exert in the name of justice. We're all implicated in this messy matrix. As we try to help, we sometimes actually make it worse. We're all perpetrators of injustice, whether we're aware of that or not. And sometimes, it's just an Amazon click away. And that's why privilege is just so hard to tackle. The threads are woven into our societal structures, and it's not as easy as me cancelling my Amazon Prime account. And so that is the question. In this messy entanglement of me and you and of us, what has the power to expel the darkness without destroying us in the process? It's not a what, it's a who. It's not boots, it's a baby. It's not politics, it's a person. It's not the concept of justice, it is Jesus. On those living in the land of deep darkness, a light has dawned. Suddenly, piercing the night, puncturing the darkness, there is a glimmer of light on the horizon. He is the promise of a child coming into the world who goes through more than snow and ice in order to get to us at Christmas. This is the promise of a child unlike any other, whose justice shines brighter than the sun, because that's who he is, because justice flows from his very character, his very being. The qualities of this promised person are outstanding. His name is Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. The kingdom he establishes flows from his very character. This is the kingdom upheld, we are told in line 7, by justice and righteousness. The need for this kind of kingdom reality spread through a stable. It crossed seas and reached the heart of one Terence Floyd. I don't know if you saw it, but George Floyd's brother Terence, in a rally after his brother's death, called for peace, not violence, to bring about change. After he said these words, the crowd began to shout, "Peace on the left, justice on the right." Reverend McCall had shared those words on Terence's behalf earlier at a church gathering, as Terence was just so overwhelmed, he couldn't say it. So when McCall was asked what Terence meant by peace on the left and justice on the right, he said, well, he wanted to make sure that you can't get one without the other. It's a very different economy of change. Peace, not violence. Justice on the right, peace on the left. And the need for both peace and justice didn't originate with Terence. They spill out from the very words we had read to us from Isaiah. Indeed, they spill out from the very child to which they point. The government established by God the Father through the Son, given to us by their Spirit, is one of peace, to which there will be no end. And this starts to pull the thread on the fabric of injustice, bringing incredible change now, but complete change later, as it is a kingdom upheld and sustained by justice and righteousness. I wonder what comes into your mind when you hear the word righteousness. You might be thinking sanctimonious, somewhat holier than thou, standoffish. Righteousness, however, it's a dazzling just display of virtuous moral brilliance. There can be no justice without righteousness, and no righteousness without justice. Because that's what we want, don't we? We want true justice, not a verdict before which we just weep in pain of how much the system has failed us. This isn't an administration of what could be called justice purely because it's been served by the judiciary. Righteousness and justice go hand in hand. Without righteousness, we are left with corruption. And without justice, we are left with just blind indifference. To sweep away the events of this past year under the rug, to turn a blind eye and pretend it never happened, is cowardice at best, and it's impotence at worst. The twin pillars of Jesus' kingdom is righteousness and justice, a kingdom in which the least are seen and the smallest grievance is held to account. The promised person undoes the darkness. And so the promise of a baby whom the people were waiting for has now arrived. As the centuries passed, that spark of promise, that hint we read in these sentences, became a flame, and it's now a roaring fire. As we heard again from this reading taken from eyewitnesses, from the account of John, that the life of Jesus, his birth, is the anticipated light, the light of his life which shines in the darkness, which others longed for in anticipation. It has arrived, and he arrived on the world stage 2,000 years ago, born of flesh and blood. The Prince of Peace comes as a baby to establish an everlasting kingdom of peace. Peace, it's a great word, isn't it? But it doesn't really stretch far enough. You know, our English word for peace is just far too insipid to convey the richness of the original meaning behind shalom. I hope you don't mind me sharing it with you. One theologian pens the distinction between first century peace and Hebrew shalom as this: peace can be negative, the absence of commotion. Shalom is positive, the presence of serenity. Peace can be partial, shalom is whole. Peace can be piecemeal, shalom is complete. Jesus doesn't just eradicate the darkness, he establishes something in its place. Shalom is not the mere absence of injustice, but the presence of serenity. It's wholeness, it's completeness, it's the dynamic of home where there's a person who knows your deepest, darkest secrets, and yet he loves you with a love that blows any other relationship you've ever experienced out of the water. A home where you're fully known, a home where you're fully loved, whole. You know, it's like that feeling of coming in from the cold and being warmed by a roaring fire, or like slowly slipping into a hot bath. It's a place where you can take off pretense because you're known and you're loved. You can leave the intensity of turn behind. You can take off your mask, figuratively and literally, and you can breathe. But what's this shalom actually rooted in? What actually has the power to bring opposing groups together in flourishing peace and doesn't overlook injustice? You know, it doesn't happen through politics, but a person. The way the early church brought people together from every conceivable background is because they had a vision of life that was rooted in the Prince of Shalom, in Jesus. He loved the poor and challenged the oppressor. He brought in women, the marginalized, the weak, the sorted, the party animals, the liars, and the hypocrites. Who else in history has brought together such diversity? No one but Jesus. It's through peace on the left and justice on the right. But it's not without cost. So it costs God the Father something to do this. To establish shalom costs the person who's seeking to establish it. And so to us, a son is given. The Father gives us the precious gift of his Son. And this child goes through more than snow and ice in order to get to us at Christmas. The baby, the God-man, later establishes shalom through the splinters of a cross and the echoing emptiness of the tomb. Jesus dies and then is raised to life. It costs God, and it will cost us if we want to pursue such shalom. We are burdened by darkness out there and darkness in here. Who has the power to expel the darkness without destroying us in the process? Could it be this baby? The promise of a baby who the people were waiting for has now arrived. And he is waiting for us. He is waiting for you. As the philosopher Roland Barthes said, to keep others waiting is the ancient prerogative of power. Dysfunctional states and oppressive regimes make their citizens wait for goods, for services, papers, and justice. Jesus, however, unlike every power-hungry dictator, unlike every cruel oppressor, unlike every darkened heart, waits not to gain something from you, but he's waiting to give something to you. Only love, only Jesus steps down and has paid what we owe. Only he is able to remove and establish what we cannot, to offer to take on our individual and collective burden of darkness, and is actually able to do it. Jesus subverts that ancient prerogative of power not by waiting to gain something from you, but by waiting to give something to you, himself. To us, a son is given. We have been given the gift of God himself, the Son of the Father sent to us, whose life shines like a beacon in the darkness, calling weary wanderers home, the tired, the broken-hearted, the activists, home to real life, real change, real community, real justice, real shalom. It's a party to which the host expects you to bring nothing other than yourself, your greatest burden, so that he can give you the gift of himself. And that's the cross. The cross is God's justice, but also it's the gateway to justice in the world, both now and forever. This Son, Jesus, comes to teach us the goodness of his peace and justice, and one day to wipe away all tears, once and for all. And it starts now with him. Going through life with him changes everything. Maybe the more significant question for you this Christmas isn't what are you waiting for, but who might be waiting for you. It's not boots, but a baby. It's not politics, it's a person. It's not the concept of justice, it is Jesus. For unto us a child is given, a son is given. And so what will you do with this gift? You know, this might sound like the first few minutes of a familiar Christmas movie. You know, you've seen it so many times, you just kind of tune out. But please don't. If you open this gift of love, of light and hope, he will change everything, both now and forever, through peace on the left and justice on the right. This Christmas, why not explore the love and justice of God, whose justice isn't standoffish but intimate? As the eternal Son, Jesus takes on flesh to show us the justice of God, not through condemnation, but through his own death as the only person in history who doesn't look worse under a microscope. Sorry, starting to lose my voice. Perhaps you have questions on what this justice in Jesus looks like for individuals and societies now, and what this means for the future. Perhaps you'd like to examine the evidence of Jesus' death and resurrection and see for yourself. Maybe you could chat with whomever invited you to come along this evening. You could go for a one-to-one walk with a Christian and a takeaway Costa. I mean, that's such a great offer. Why not go for that? Or you could even explore questions together in a small group. But maybe, if you're wondering if this baby really can do it, why not say a few words to Jesus and ask him to show you the beauty of his being and the light of his life? If you'd like to do this with someone or chat, there's a prayer Zoom line afterwards that you can join. Don't worry, cameras are going to be off. Jesus might just be the gift that you never expected this Christmas. As you move towards some of these things, I hope that you might... Oh, what a legend, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, that's much better. As you move towards some of these things, I hope that you might meet the one waiting for you, the light shining in the darkness. Thank you so much for listening. Happy Christmas, and I hope that you have a really wonderful time. Thank you.